Improved graphics are coming to a Microsoft Flight Simulator for Sim Update 6, just a few weeks away. Meanwhile, VR controller support, including support for Oculus Touch, will be coming in November. That will be part of Update 7. There's a load of other things to discuss as well today, so let's take a look. Now, the latest developer Q&A for Microsoft Flight Simulator took place this week, and the devs discussed many different points about the sim. A large focus of the discussion was on the upcoming Sim Update 6, so let's start with that. One very interesting feature then will be a change to the terrain detail slider. Currently this goes to a maximum of 200, with the next update this will be extended to a maximum of 400, and this will allow for improved visual quality of the ground elements as well as vastly extend the levels of detail for the viewing distance. Some examples here are of trees that have been further improved. Originally, a tree a lot went too far, using too much memory. So Asobo cut this back quite a bit. In fact, they soon realised they'd cut it back way too far. So since that point, they've improved it a little by little each update, and will improve it again with Update 6. You can see that here. The devs have also made a big pass on improving night lighting. Render distance now goes much further, whilst the lights themselves are being drawn more efficiently. This clip shows night lighting from an altitude of around 39,000 feet, as it will appear in the next update. Meanwhile, terrain morphing is still definitely a problem, and Asobo recognise this. However, they say that setting terrain quality to 400 pushes the morphing further into the distance, which will make it less noticeable. Now, if you're expecting a performance hit for these changes, then you will be right. However, Asobo have said that the performance hit is relatively small. They made the comparison that terrain detail set at level 400 in Sim Update 6 has better performance than terrain detail at level 200 a year ago. The next update isn't all about graphics, however. There are a few flight model changes and improvements coming as well. One of these will allow third-party plane makers to have better access to how lift applies to flap levels. Similarly, improvements have been made to angle of attack, so all of these combined should give better access and better tools for plane makers for improvements in the future. Moving on to Working Title. Working Title have been working on the NXI for the past 5 months or so. They wanted that to be a feature-complete system. One thing they spent a lot of time on is the flight planning system. Now all the RNAV approaches are possible with the system, so that's going to be pretty good. And the system will also contain all the relevant and correct autopilot types. This update is now available on the in-game marketplace, so do check that out if you want to get access to it. Basically, it's an optional extra. Eventually, it will be moved fully into the sim, but for now it's on the marketplace, so you can basically choose to use it as an option just to test it out. Now, the accuracy that Working Title have added to the NXI update will eventually be moved into the full sim so that it can be used with all the other avionics systems. This will allow it to be used by third-party developers as well. On another note, Working Title are going to be improving the 747 and the 787, so complete overhauls apparently of those two planes. Now, Asobo know this is something that really needs a lot of work, so they've enlisted the help of Working Title in order to do this. They'll also be working on improving ATC in the future as well, something I know a lot of people are definitely going to welcome very much. Working Title then seem to be working very heavily and very close then with Asobo and Microsoft on Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, moving on to weather. This is something that's been asked many times in the past, but once again it did come up. Can the weather API be opened up to third parties? Microsoft are pretty adamant that the answer to that is no. And this is in part due to licensing issues, but it's also due to server costs of allowing third-party developers to pull all the additional data requests, which apparently would be quite significant. Asobo basically wants to come up with a compromise on this, and so we're looking into it. So maybe something will happen. Maybe there'll be an alternative option. Allowing third-party developers, for example, to modify weather with mods might be an option. Asobo want to allow this to be done in a way that doesn't break things, however. Continuing with the subject of weather, moving on to live weather though, this does obviously need improving. Asobo did briefly touch on that. They said that the problem is that certain types of weather doesn't blend well. Asobo say that it's a very complex system to get right, and this is due to the fact that so much data, so much different real-time data needs to be gathered. Sim Update 7, however, will include a new weather system from Meteo Blue, which should help with all of this, so looking forward to that. A very, very brief section on helicopters. We know that Asobo do want to implement helicopters. We also know they have started work on this. But the reason, one of the reasons at least, that all this is taking so long is that helicopters need propeller simulation, or very, very accurate propeller simulation, more so perhaps than the current set of planes within the sim. So essentially a lot of work, a lot of time is going to go into propeller simulation, and Asobo want to make sure that this can all be carried across to the current set of prop planes and future prop planes. So yeah, there's another side to helicopters. It's not just about helicopters, but about simulating things as well. Multi-screen support, again, next year. No date on that, however. Replay functionality, a slightly different answer on that this time around. Asobo, as we know, currently use a replay functionality which is used by the video production team over at Microsoft and perhaps within Asobo themselves. So this is basically a dev tool. Now, head of Microsoft Flight Simulator, Jörg Newman, wants to release this tool to the public in an upcoming update. But there is some debate in Asobo and in Microsoft about this, because the dev tool doesn't have a good high-quality UI or consumer-friendly UI. However, Jörg knows that many people actually want this functionality, and yep, I'd be one of those for sure. So right now they're having a debate on whether or not to release the dev tool in its current form and just add it into the dev mode of the sim. Basically give people the option to use it if they're willing to go in and risk fiddling around with things and using it in a not particularly consumer-friendly format. I'm all for one for seeing that type of implementation, as long as in the long-term future we get an improved UI as well. So I guess let's see how it goes. The next subject is one I see brought up quite often in the comment section of my videos, and that is the various crashes that Microsoft Flight Simulator is suffering from. So apparently many of the crashes have been fixed, at least many of the major crashes, and this has gave Asobo the chance to look at some of the other crashes that are happening to a lower number of users. Basically, Asobo want to reprioritize how they are fixing crashes and look at some of the ones just affecting a smaller number of users. Again, all of these various crashes probably add up to quite a number of different things in total, but individual ones may only be affecting a small number of people. So basically at the moment it's a case of prioritizing these and getting around to them. And this actually quite nicely brings us on to Sim Update 8. This will be available and released early next year in 2022. That update then will be entirely about fixing the sim, that is, fixing the bugs, fixing crashes, and all the various other problems that the sim is currently suffering from. Basically, Asobo agree with many from the community that the release pace of new content and new additions has pretty much got away with things, and it means that a lot of outstanding bugs, a lot of outstanding problems have remained in the sim for a very, very long time now. So as such, they want to dedicate a complete sim update to fixing these various issues. So personally, I suspect this may well have a bit of relationship to the reception and the effect of Sim Update 5, which we all know had quite a few problems, just to put it mildly. Now, Jörg Newman says that the update was great in one way because, yes, it did deliver on new content, and of course it did give people some great performance improvements, and I know they were very, very proud of the work they did there. So that's one side of things. The other side of things is that Jörg also said he knows that they made some mistakes with the release of Sim Update 7. And in part this was due to the amount of rewrite that was actually went into the Sim Update 5, a lot of that to bring about the performance gains that we saw. Basically, the branch that they released there was around about 7 months old, so a lot of work obviously having gone into that, and they were working on that right up to the last minute. So essentially, they feel they should have left it perhaps a bit longer before releasing that to the public. In terms of what this approach, what this lesson means for the future, Asobo mentioned the upcoming DirectX 12 update. This essentially will be a complete rework of the sim, many other aspects of the sim, and Asobo suspect it will break a few things, and honestly, how can it not? For this reason, DirectX 12 will be an optional update. If some people have issues with it, they will be able to use the DirectX 11 build instead. So basically these will run side by side for quite a while before eventually they will retire the DirectX 11 build. Another thing they want to change is to refocus world updates and sim updates again. The idea here has always been that world updates should just contain world updates, but over time, they eventually started containing various fixes and various changes to big parts of the code. So this is something that they're going to change. World updates are going back to just being world updates again, whilst sim updates will have the code changes. And this will give Asobo and Microsoft a 2-month testing phase for sim updates rather than the current 30 days. So all in all, quite a few changes there. 2 other features then for the future is the VR controller support that will be coming with the Sim Update 7. Sim Update 7 will be releasing in November, so this won't be too far away. What this means is that when in VR, you'll be able to use VR controllers, such as the Oculus Touch controllers, to interact directly with the in-game panels. So, flipping switches, touching buttons, and all the rest of it should be a direct thing in the not-too-distant future. You can see some tidbits on the screen here of the improvements and changes that will be coming to VR with the Sim Update 7. And finally, once again, the subject of DLSS come up again. This is something that Asobo keep looking into, or said they have looked into in the past, and they seem to be of the idea that they'll implement it at some point in the future, but the impression I got is that they weren't too keen on that idea, and they did say it isn't a priority. Asobo have investigated DLSS and found that it doesn't offer a tremendous benefit to Microsoft Flight Simulator. Whilst the tech obviously does offer huge benefits to first-person shooters and pretty much every other game out there, the benefits they feel for Flight Sim are very limited, and this is due to the way that when you're up in the sky and looking down at all the complexity of the various terrain and terrain elements, it just doesn't really factor into DLSS very, very well. So it means that the tech isn't really a priority for them to implement. They'd rather go on their render scale technology at the moment and keep focusing on that. So NVIDIA DLSS, something maybe for the future. So that brings us to the end of this video. Do let me know in the section below which things you're looking forward to with the future sim updates. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.